Hey guys, it's Rich with your Monday Spot and Pagan Perspective. This week we're talking about exposing witchcraft. This week's question comes from the Candle Vlogger, who asks, will you please watch Exposing Witchcraft by Carol Kornacki and tell me what you think? I really have no idea what to do. I too have dreams where I see images of gods and goddesses, but I don't know if they're trying to tell me something or whether or not I'm going crazy. In her videos, Carol talks about being a witch and the devil and how it is all whitewashed Satanism. Please help me figure this out. I have no idea what to do. And it's signed Christine. First of all, I'm going to first apologize that this video is going to be pretty long. Cara gave us this topic, gave us the opportunity to prepare for this topic about a month or two in advance because of all the videos out there with Carol Kornacki, and I definitely have some very strong opinions. I also want to apologize that in another lifetime, in another existence, I would be one of those like Carol Kornacki. I was once one of those ones that would tell every pagan that they were absolutely wrong, that what they believe doesn't exist, and everybody that I've told that to, at least in my circle of friends that I remember saying this to, I've done an apology to them that, hey, I was totally in the wrong, that was hate speech, and I offer my apology to anybody that is out there also that I could have affected in any way. So, a little soul bearing. So I hope you guys will bestow forgiveness upon me for that. So, anywho, getting into this week's topic. First, when watching her videos, and you can find them by typing in Exposing Witchcraft, Carol Kornacki, in the search term above, because it's like 15 videos, so I didn't want to link to all of them in the bottom bar, all that stuff. Anyway, these are all my notes. Anyway, so first off, I want to address what she said about her need for power. She approached witchcraft with the wrong intentions. She approached it with the intention of wanting power and wanting to harness power in some way. Totally, for me at least, the way I see witchcraft is the wrong way to approach it. Approaching paganism, witchcraft, anything of the sort, anything in between, should be more about the spiritual journey and what it does for you on a personal level, rather than the power that you hold that you can wield over other people. Having the capability to wield power over somebody does not necessarily give you the right to wield power over somebody. And that's something that most people learn just starting out with studying witchcraft or the occult in any manner. This is something that they learn, that just because you can wield power does not mean you should be wielding power over somebody. And then she goes into a lot of different things that I actually have a real big problem with. One of my pet peeves is inaccuracy in research and just spewing out inaccuracies. And these are just some of the highlights. She says that pagans worship the elements. I don't know about you, but I work with the elements. I see the elements as energy flows. And this is just me. I know other people have differing opinions where they see the elements as beings, as either angels or fairies, different staunch beings that can help in your magical working. However, I see the elemental energies as energy. I don't necessarily see them as beings. So, no, I don't see them as beings to be worshipped, and I certainly don't worship them. I let them flow through me and work with them and circle around me and be a part of my practice, but I certainly don't worship and pay homage to them. I thank them for what they do as energetic beings, however, not worship. More of a friendship. Then she says, none of them believe in Jesus as the Son of God. Well, Carol Kornacki, you are absolutely and utterly incorrect. Because I'm sitting right here and I have a small group of friends here on YouTube that would agree that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, at least in our practice, the way that we relate to Christ. So, you are utterly wrong on that, with your absolutes of nobody believing Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And then she got into the more provable. When she said Aleister Crowley had 666 tattooed on his forehead. No. In my research, I have found nothing that states that Aleister Crowley ever had 666 written or tattooed on his forehead. I'm not a huge fan of Crowley, but I understand and I appreciate the things that he's done in the pagan community. But again, like I said, I'm not a fan of his. But the inaccuracy of having 666 tattooed on his forehead, no. She also states that the peace sign is taking the crucifix, putting it upside down, and then breaking the crucifix. It says that it's a pagan rite, a pagan ritual. For one, I've not heard any pagans or any witches in general ever saying anything about this type of ritual. If you out there have ever done this type of ritual, let me know. Because, yeah, I've never heard of this, nor is the peace sign, in any of the research that I've done, ever been even related to the crucifix itself. It has been related to an olive branch, and there's certain biblical texts that goes back to, and also an olive branch dealing in paganism. But no. And in fact, I do believe that, I want to say it was Pablo Picasso really made the peace sign famous as it is today known. And I believe that was in the 50s. I want to say it was Picasso, but I could be incorrect on that one. Yeah. Incorrect on that as far as all of my research has gone. And if she even did a lick of research, most of her lecture would be cut down to about 10 minutes. She makes an offhand comment in her lecture saying that fear not is mentioned 366 times, one for each day of the year, and one for leap day. Now, she says this is mentioned 366 times in the Bible. I did not go through it and check. However, I think it's weird that she makes that correlation only because we didn't have the same calendars back then. I think we talked about calendars, was it 2 months ago or something like that? Yeah. We didn't have the same calendars So that is, in my opinion, just a coincidence. Plus, she didn't take into consideration any of the other books. And that's another thing that I'm getting to later on. Moving on. She says ninja is the art of assassination, which, no, it's kind of more of a stealthy spy, kind of equivalent to the CIA covert operatives in the US, of course. She then says that the pentacle represents the crescent moon. Now, I will be the first to say that for the longest time, up until just about, I'd say probably a year ago, I didn't really relate to the pentacle as much. As you guys know, I am more of a triquetra fan, but as far as I know, it does not necessarily represent the crescent moon. It can represent the full moon, but in all the explanations that I've seen for the pentacle, it is a representation of the four elemental energies and the spirit that they all come together to form, all encompassed within a circle, an unbreakable bond, at least. And I could be incorrect on this, so if I am, please correct me, of course, as usual. I have not seen references to it being associated with the crescent moon. So, again, she got that wrong. In her first segment, she says a person took this 2-year-old kid, put him on a railroad track, and just wanted to see the body split apart. It's pretty gruesome, and this is one of the tactics that these evangelical preachers or lecturers use to kind of disgust you and to make you have that visceral feeling. And the thing that really got me was that she says he was working for Satan. And the problem that I have with this is that she blames Satan as if this guy wouldn't have done it if he was crazy or if he was just a psychopath. She makes it sound as if, other than the devil being in cahoots with him, he was a good guy, is the way she makes it sound. Now, following her path of logic here, it sounds like she's excusing the free will that human beings have, that is talked about in the book of Job. Again, in the Bible, the story of Job, if you're not familiar, talks about the devil being able to tempt Job into betraying God. However, Job is given the free will to denounce the devil, is more or less the story. So, yeah, I think that her line of logic with this is very flawed. Certainly, I'm not excusing the man and his actions, hurting this young child, but I believe that her comments about it was quite off. This is one that I really like, is that she talks about Aleister Crowley's heroin addiction, and she never addresses that she actually had a heroin addiction herself. At least not in this lecture. She does mention it in other lectures, and I'll get to that towards the end. She doesn't address her own heroin addiction. She doesn't address anything like that. But she uses the drug angle on Aleister Crowley to make him seem like an even worse person than what she previously stated. So, like I said, I'm not a fan of Aleister Crowley, just not a big player in my life as far as somebody that's really influenced me. But like I said before, I do appreciate what he's brought to the pagan community. Here's another one that she brings up, is she tells us to watch what we decorate with, referencing a story in the Bible, referencing things in her own home. She talks about watching what you decorate, but later in her lecture she says, whenever she's discussing Halloween and people drawing hexes, or no, she was talking about Papa Smurf in this one, I'm sorry. She goes into Papa Smurf drawing a hexagram, and she says, well, whenever I used to draw a hexagram, you should be worried. Well, she says, well, whenever you are saved, and whenever she says that, it's in reference to saved by the blood of Christ. She says that when you're saved, you don't have to worry about what people do against you, such as hexagrams, or hexagrams being in your presence, because you are saved by the blood of Christ. Following her line of logic, then why do I have to watch what I decorate with? If I don't have to worry about somebody drawing a hexagram to work against me because of my faith in Christ, then I shouldn't have to worry about what enters my house as far as a decoration. Again, her logic astounds me at the leaps and bounds that it takes. It's like a marathon runner. And now we get into something that really, I had to look this up for my own edification. She talks about Halloween, and Halloween being a festival for the god Samhain. Well, in my research, and not working much with Celtic deities, I've not heard of Samhain. I know of the festival of Samhain, the Sabbath of Samhain, but I never knew of a god of Samhain. So I looked it up, and I believe what it was saying was that Samhain is actually the name of the month of November in Celtic traditions. It could be of October, but it was the festival of bringing in the cows, bringing them in from the pastures up in the hills and all that stuff. It was a festival of preparing for the winter and preparing for what is to come. It has nothing to do with a deity called Samhain. And many scholars, pagan scholars, will actually agree with this. And I think where a lot of people get tripped up with this and have this line of logic actually goes back to, I believe it's the 1800s, mid-1800s, whenever this guy wrote of Samhain, or I think it was a dictionary or something like that. He wrote of Samhain and said that it was a god. And it was an error in his writing, him not checking his facts back then, that has now bled into everybody saying that it is a ritual for Samhain. So again, an inaccuracy in her lecture. And she also says about a virgin sacrifice to Samhain. Well, of course, if you don't have a god called Samhain, then you don't have a virgin to sacrifice to Samhain. Now, with that being said, there were virgin sacrifices. I believe it was in England, and it wasn't really a huge thing that happened. I believe it was only in one area of England, or within the Celtic area, that one individual said, you know, you will sacrifice a virgin. And eventually he ended up dying, and they stopped doing that. So again, I don't know where she's getting her lecture facts, but another inaccuracy by Carol Kornacki. And then she goes into talking about media and the influence of media on our children and on us ourselves, which I do agree that there is a certain amount of influence that the idiot box, as most people call it, that it does bring into your life. And I do agree with that to a certain extent, but I think you should also be able to make up your own mind. Like, whenever you watch this, you're going to say, well, Rich, you said, BS on this, and, this is actually true. This is what I believe. So, whenever you watch this, you're having that filter of, this is a good idea, this is a bad idea. But anyway, she goes into some of the popular things in the Times, which I'm thinking this was around the mid-90s that this lecture was produced, because she talks about The Nightmare Before Christmas whenever it first came out, and I believe that was in the mid-90s, and I could be wrong on that. So she talks about The Nightmare Before Christmas, and she says, see what they're doing to the holiday of celebrating the birth of Christ, which, if she actually knew her calendar facts, the birth of Christ is celebrated close to Yule for a reason. And I'm not going to get into the big argument of who came first and who had what holiday and everything. I have a video on my personal channel on some of the foolishness that some people go back and forth with whenever it comes to holidays, and which holiday should you celebrate and this and that. Anywho, I'm not going to get into that. But she needs to know her facts on the holidays. And I kind of get the inkling that she actually thinks that we are celebrating the actual day instead of celebrating the reason of the birth of Christ. And in my tradition, it is the coming of a redeemer, of a teacher, of the Messiah. So, again, my tradition. But it's more of the reason that we're celebrating than celebrating his actual birthday. So, with that all aside, I think she should do her research on that. But with that aside, she openly states that she only went in there at the very end of Nightmare Before Christmas. She saw that people were disfigured and, it just looked weird to her. So it gave her the heebie-jeebies. And so she doesn't actually say that, the storyline behind it is actually kind of nice. I kind of enjoy it. It's not something that I'm going to sit down and watch over and over, but the overall movie is okay in my opinion. And I really wish she would have done more research on this movie in particular, because she quotes songs from it and she quotes the way people look at in it, but she doesn't actually even know the storyline. And that really bugs me. Then she talks about Bart Simpson, which, again, she doesn't realize this is satire. The Simpsons are probably the greatest satire ever out there that has probably gotten a lot of flack over the last 20 plus years. Actually, probably closer to 30 now. And she doesn't realize that it's satire. It's pointing and making fun of certain things that are happening in America, and it's trying to make light of the situation to kind of make people laugh, but it also makes them think at the same time. If you watch with intention with your videos, with movies, with TV shows in general, you start to think, how does this reflect in my own life? What do I believe with this? And it actually gets you starting to think. So that's really what satire is. That is lighthearted. And she doesn't seem to understand that. She points out Roseanne. Now, the Roseanne show is one of my favorites. I grew up watching it. And she states about Roseanne giving her kids protection for whenever they were starting to become sexually active, putting her daughters on the pill and whatnot. And I'm going to say yes, if you're going to remain abstinent until marriage and your partner does the same, then yes, you don't have to worry about STDs in that aspect, or sexually transmitted diseases in that aspect, being transferred through sexual contact. However, Roseanne was dealing with the everyday reality of the blue-collar worker, and this is something that a lot of families had to go through in their own minds whether or not they were actually going to do this for their children, because would you rather them be safe, or would you rather them, go out and not be prepared? And Roseanne made the conscious decision to give her children protection and to educate them on that if you do this, be safe, and here's how. So Roseanne probably saved a lot of lives in that aspect. And I'm not saying that to be flippant or anything. I'm saying that with the spread of STDs and teen pregnancy out there, and the list goes on, that she probably saved a lot of people by having that on her television show. Saving people from situations that they would not want to be in later in life. And then she talks about Married with Children. I find it hilarious. But it is obviously of a disturbed family that constantly meets a run of misfortune. She doesn't seem to understand that entertainment is just for entertainment value, and it's supposed to be lighthearted, it's supposed to be comedy, it's supposed to be a way to relax and unwind. Not everybody gets enjoyment out of watching National Geographic and the History Channel and Christian television. Not everybody does. So, this is another venue that the entertainment, the media, has taken in order to appeal to the masses. And she says this one thing that I actually kind of agree with. She talks about song lyrics and the power of words, and I do agree with that. I don't usually start singing a song until I know what words, I know the message that is behind it. I don't like to listen to songs that I have no clue what they're saying. That's just me personally. I like to know what is going on in the lyrics. I want to know what the song is about. But again, that's just me. I will agree with her that song lyrics, when sang, especially by a witch, they have power. It gets you into a state of mind, a state of being. And with her own way of saying that words have power, that's probably one of the witchiest things that she said in her entire lecture. Later on, she talks about using a Ouija board and it being a game. Now, I want to take this in a couple different directions. First, I want to say that if you're dealing with a Ouija board, most likely you have done your research, or hopefully you have done your research, and know that it is not a game. It is not a game any more than my wand is a stick. When you're working with a Ouija board, it's not a game, it's a tool, it's a way to interact with the spiritual realm, with your higher self, with deity, and there's countless other ways to view dealing with a Ouija board, dealing with tarot cards. Again, for me, personally, tarot cards are a tool of divination. They are not just playing cards. I'm not going to go and deal them out like a deck of playing cards. That's just not their purpose. My mala beads, my rosary beads, they are not jewelry. They have a religious significance. They are a tool that I use. Same with my athame. It is a ritual item. It is a tool to be used, not a knife to go buttering a piece of toast. So, with that being said, the Ouija board to me is not a game. It is a tool used for divination. So, getting the word game out of there, she says that whenever she used the Ouija board, that she brought the spirits into her, and they spoke through her. So, very much this is, of course, channeling. And the problem that I have with this is, for one, I don't channel. And I think I've said this before on a previous video, even invoking deity. I don't invoke deity into me. I am just not either ready or comfortable dealing with somebody else in my body. Very much room for one in here. So for me, channeling is not something to just be done frivolously at the whim, at a whim, just giving your body over to a spirit just all willy-nilly. Most people would agree that I've listened to or that I've heard talk about channeling. Yeah, that is not something that you just do willy-nilly. It's not something that you allow a spirit to do to you. So for her offering up, hey spirits, anybody that's available, come on through. Not a good idea. Not a good idea, in my opinion. You never know who's going to come through. So, that's another aspect that I wanted to touch on here, especially since she says that she has had inside of her 11 demons that were spirit guides. I think she, if I'm not mistaken, she said that they were once seen to her as spirit guides, as good spirits. And then she says that they were demons that were inside of her. Well, there's a big difference between demons and spirit guides. Now, as somebody that does believe in demons and demonic capabilities and the devil, I know many of you out there do not. And, it's just a difference of opinions, just a ongoing debate on whether or not there is evil out there such as this. But I personally believe that there is a devil. I personally believe that there are demons out there. But to have 11 demons in you at once, I don't think any exorcist out there has seen that many demons in one person. So she kind of holds a record, in my opinion. I also haven't heard of anybody bringing that many familiar spirits in any sense, whether it be spirit guides or spirits that they're working with, spirits of the dead. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody bringing that many spirits into themselves at one time. To me, that seems kind of setting yourself up for failure, especially if you don't know exactly who they are. I think that also goes hand in hand with her not really knowing what she's doing as a witch, and I'll get to that here in a little bit. It just doesn't seem like something that, it doesn't seem like a thing, is basically what I'm trying to get out there. She is a friend, a prayer partner, or whatever you want to call it, with Benny Hinn, which personally disgusts me. If you're not familiar with Benny Hinn, he's the guy that goes dancing across the stage, bunks somebody in the head, and they fall down, and then they get up and they say, I'm healed, after they came onto the stage with crutches or in a wheelchair or something like that. Apparently, hitting people in the forehead instantly heals them. And this is something that Benny Hinn does. And he's made a hell of a lot of money doing it. And I'm sure she's made a heck of a lot of money doing what she's doing here as well. I think it was interesting that she mentioned Benny Hinn in her lectures, because a lot of the stuff he says actually against the Bible. So his own teachings are flawed. But that's a different video, possibly for my personal channel. She goes on to talk about meditation in schools, and she says that teachers are having them contact spirits or their spirit guides and whatnot. For one, I have never heard of a teacher telling a student to contact a spirit guide for any school out there. Quiet meditation or quiet reflection, a moment of silence, those I have heard of. What she doesn't realize or doesn't say is that, at least for a lot of people out there, meditation is seen as the act of listening to God or listening to messages to come to you. And I did a video on it. I'll link to it here
on my personal channel, but to me, prayer is the act of speaking to God. Meditation is the act of listening for God's answers or anybody's answers out there. And spell work's totally different. But I will link to that video. You guys can go ahead and watch it at your leisure. And but she mentions meditation and as if it's a huge bad thing. And it really irritated me because she doesn't actually say what meditation is. And whenever you're looking at it, a lot of Christians meditate because they want to hear what God has to say to them. And one of the last points I have here is, she says that there's 66 books in the Bible. Actually, Carol, if you look in the Catholic Bible, there's the Apocrypha, and you didn't include all the ones that got thrown out at the Council of Nicaea, and I can't remember the name of the other council off the top of my head, where they decide on books in the Bible. You haven't discussed the fact that there's other books of the Bible out there. You say there's only 66. No, in fact, there are quite a large number more. So you're talking about the 66 that are agreed upon in the Protestant faith, in the Protestant branch of Christianity. And the last point I want to make is the healing of emotional wounds. She says that, in a therapy session, being regressed back to the moment that something happened and bestowing love and healing and comfort to your younger self. She says this is wrong. It plants things in your mind and whatnot. What? Seriously? No. Whenever you're dealing with healing of emotional wounds, and I think Megan can speak far more on this with her training and her background, her career background. I think she can speak more on this than I can, but as I understand it, regressing back to that self and healing things and dealing with things that have happened in your past is healthy. It's accepting them in order to change them. And like I said, hopefully Megan will touch a little bit more on that, if she would be so kind, within the therapy background that she holds. And hopefully she can speak a little bit more on that. So, all in all, Exposing Witchcraft by Carol Kornacki. My thoughts. Carol Kornacki, and I'm going to express my thoughts by talking directly to her if she were ever to come across this video. Carol Kornacki, I think that if you took some time, sought out a reputable therapist, and dealt with the emotional wounds that you encountered within your life, I think that you would not be spewing hatred on the behalf of Jesus Christ. I think that you would not be spewing the hatred of Christ, but instead you would be offering the comfort to people that Christ could bring. Following your line of logic is mind-boggling. You take leaps and bounds that are not only historically inaccurate, but are not even close to relevant to what you're saying. And not even that, you constantly contradict yourself in your own lecture. I'm trying to contain my anger that I have for what you're doing, because it's people like you. That is why so many people in the pagan community can't stand Christianity. It is because people like you don't even try to make it something that they can, for one, come to with honest questions, or for two, feel accepted in any way. Maybe if you, Carol Kornacki, dealt with some of your own emotional issues from your past, which I must say is actually quite questionable, seeing that you never say how many years you actually were a witch. You don't say who you practiced under. You don't say where you learned any of this stuff. You don't say any of that stuff. You just say, oh, I used to be a witch, and this is what I used to do. I used to do spells against people. You say that. But the thing that you don't say is that most pagans out there will not do a spell or a ritual against somebody in a malicious manner, which you clearly state that you would do. That you would draw a hexagram against somebody in order to hex somebody. You say that you would do this, but you don't say that most pagans or witches that aren't necessarily pagan in nature, you don't say that most of them will not do that type of magic. You constantly state about how evil you were, but in reality, I'm not sure you were ever really a witch. I have a hard time actually fathoming that you actually practiced witchcraft in a serious sense for an extended period of time. I do have a problem believing that your testimony is actually even close to accurate. I have a problem believing this because you make it sound so terrible. And while, yes, you could have had a terrible life, and I'm not saying that it's not possible that your life could not have been traumatic at any time, but I think you're overselling yourself. You're making yourself seem as if you were so much bigger than you actually were. Which until you made this series, I don't think anybody ever heard of you. More so, I think a lot of the stuff that underlines your story might also have to do with the fact that you were strung out for so many years that you even say that you did not know most times what was going on, that you would go walk down the streets and not even know your name, that this is the type of state that you were in while practicing witchcraft. And I personally think that some of the stuff that you believe you did might have been in your own head. That you might have just been a little nuts. You never talk of your spiritual journey at that point, in that part of your life, when witchcraft and paganism is very much for many people out there, and I think I speak for many people out there, whenever I say that witchcraft and paganism is a spiritual journey. Let me tell you this, Carol Kornacki. I used to be on the road that you are on right now. In another lifetime, I would be your protege. I would be right there with you, right with Benny Hinn, bunking people in the head and making them fall down and healing them. In another lifetime, I would be exactly like you. But Carol Kornacki, I have found that paganism and Christianity can get along, and not only get along, but be in harmony with one another. That there is more of an underlying spiritual journey that is to be addressed whenever coming to paganism and being Christian, or even studying it in any way, and you never touch on any of that. You never touch on a spiritual journey at all, which I think is what was probably lacking in your life at the time. I try my best, especially on Pagan Perspective here, to approach everything and have respect for everybody. But for people like you, Carol Kornacki, I do not have respect for what you're doing to the reputation of Jesus Christ, the church in general. I think you're giving the church a bad name. I think you're giving Christianity in general a bad name. And I think you should just shut up. In paganism, I have found a lot of things. I have found who I am in life. And most importantly, I have found that they can live in harmony, Christianity and paganism. And another thing that I have found is love, hugs, and ladybugs. Goodbye.